means playing it safe. You think incremental gains stack up dominance. Well, wrong. History's titans didn't climb mountains, they triggered avalanches. Consider Akio Morita. 1955, his company, Sony barely solvent, a titan of American industry, Belova, offers a life saving order 100,000 radios, enough cash to drown their debt. The catch? Slap the Belova name on his invention. Morita's response? He refused. Told them essentially to pound sand. Is that financial suicide? To the spreadsheet jockeys, yes. An act of sheer self destructive arrogance. Trading solvency for what? Pride? No. He traded pennies today for continents tomorrow. While competitors chase quarterly earnings like dogs chasing cars, Akio was laying the foundation for a brand that would be synonymous with global innovation. Rejecting guaranteed revenue wasn't a mistake, it was calculated aggression. The cost of short term survival versus the price of long term sovereignty. Most CEOs would need a defibrillator after such a gamble. Akio just built a $100 billion empire. What allows a man to stare into the abyss of bankruptcy and spit? It wasn't guts. It wasn't vision. Not the way biographies tell it. It was the cold application of a principle stolen directly from the evolutionary biology, the niche construction. Organisms don't just adapt to their environment, they actively shape it to ensure their dominance. Akio wasn't just building radios, he was terraforming the entire consumer landscape. Forget brand building. That's marketing fluff. By the end of this podcast, you'll understand the brand sovereignty as a asymmetric warfare. How Akio weaponized identity, rejecting parasitic partnership, manufacturing desire from thin air to achieve market colonization. You wield this principle not to compete, but to make competition irrelevant. Ignore this and keep fighting trench warfare while your rivals are deploying strategic power. So I'm going to be breaking down 10 principles. The first one is lessons from Mr. Akio. The first lesson is called Create Markets by Understanding Latent Needs. Conventional wisdom relies on market research, asking customers what they want. But customers rarely articulate needs for things that don't yet exist. Akio seemed to understand this limitation intuitively. So, when the Walkman concept, if people that don't know what a Walkman is, a portable cassette player, emerged in late 70s, internal skepticism was high. Why buy a playback-only device? Akio, however, observed existing behavior, the popularity of car stereos, and understood the context of increasingly mobile lifestyles. He didn't just guess. He inferred a latent need for personal, portable, high-quality audio. His assertion, millions have bought car stereo without recording capability. Millions will buy this machine. Wasn't blind faith, but an analogy-based inference about unmet demand. So, how does this apply to you? Because I want to share lessons and make sure it's relatable and how you can apply it to your venture business, how it's going to help you build your empire. So, for this particular reason, don't just ask what people want. Observe what they do, what constraints they operate under. For truly novel products, focus on fundamental value proposition. An example would be private, portable sound. That might override perceived feature gaps. This requires looking beyond stated preference to uncover deeper, unarticulated needs. Lesson number 2. Build long-term assets, especially brand, even at short-term costs. Enduring companies possess assets that appreciate over time. Brand is paramount among these. So the name Sony and the Bulova of offer, the original name Tokyo, I'm not sure I'm gonna pronounce this correctly. Tushin Kogyo was unwieldy global, choosing Sony, derived from the Latin sonus, which means sound, and Sony was a strategic investment in a simple, memorable, universal brand asset. Despite internal resistance favoring tradition, this foresight was tested dramatically in 1955. Bulova offered a massive order for Sony's transistor radios, worth more than Sony's total capitalization, if they were branded Bulova, but Akio refused. Akio wasn't being merely stubborn. He made a cold calculation. The immediate cash infusion was less valuable than the long-term compounding value of an independent Sony brand built over decades. This exemplifies patient capital and the discipline to reject seemingly lucrative deals that undermine core strategic goals, like building unique brand equity. A strong brand is competitive moat, but slowly and expensively, but is yielding outsized returns. All right. Strategy number 3, treat sustained investment as essential, not optional. Growth in technology requires continuous advancement. Coasting on past successes is a recipe for obsolescence. Consistent R&D and funding. Sony consistently dedicated 6 to 10% of sales to R&D. 6 to 10% of sales to R&D. Akio openly criticized the short-term focus or firms fixated on quarterly results, arguing it starved necessary long-term investment in capabilities. R&D isn't just an expense. It's an engine of future competitiveness, like compound interest. Sustained investment in knowledge and technical ability builds an advantage over time. Akio viewed this not spending, but rational capital allocation towards future value creation, resisting the pressure for immediate profitability at the expense of long-term health. So where are you focusing, especially now with technology? The AI is going to disrupt a lot of things. You have to allocate time, energy, resources into AI. Now, depending on your industry, there are things to focus on other than AI, but you need to do R&D. You need to have, Sony's rule of thumb is 6 to 10% of sales in R&D. You pick the number that is going to make sense for your business, your industry. All right, principle number 4, make quality a foundational strategy, not just a feature. In early days, made in Japan often implied low quality. So that was the association with Japan, low quality products. But Morita was determined to invert this perception, elevating made in Japan. Morita anecdote about the waiter pointing out a cheap Japanese umbrella highlights a personal drive. But the strategy was pure business logic. By embedding rigorous quality control and emphasizing reliability in design and manufacturing, Sony aimed to become the Cadillac of electronics. So superior quality isn't just about customer satisfaction. It's a strategic pillar supporting the brand reputation, justifying premium pricing and building long-term customer trust. It requires operational excellence and a cultural commitment that permeates the organization. This wasn't just about the national pride. It was about building a defensible market position based on demonstrable value. Lesson number 5 is seek strategic control over complementary assets. So value often lies in the intersection of different parts of an ecosystem. Controlling key nodes can create significant advantages. So I'll tell you a time when CBS Records and Columbia Pictures acquisition, Akio foresaw the convergence of hardware and software. acquiring major music and film studios in the late 80s, 2 billion for CBS Records and 3.4 billion for Columbia Pictures was a massive bet. The goal wasn't just diversification. It was to create a synergistic relationship. Sony hardware, CD players, VCRs, feature devices would have ready supply of Sony content and vice versa. This was a great bolt-on acquisition. Owning a complementary assets in the value chain provides strategic leverage, potential for bundling, a greater resilience against shifts in any single market segment. While execution is complex, M&A is always a complex process. The strategic intent was to build a more integrated and defensible entertainment ecosystem. Lesson number 6. I hope you found value. If you have found value, hit the like, hit the subscribe. And here we go to lesson number 6, which is align incentives through shared purpose. Organizations function best when individual incentives align with collective goals. So, family within the firm. Akio focused on a family-like feeling. That is the culture that he created, and emphasizing that employees' fates were tied to the company's wasn't just benevolent management. This approach aimed to reduce agency costs, the inherent conflict between employee-manager self-interest and the company's long-term interests, fostering loyalty, shared purpose, and recognizing intrinsic motivators such as pride in work, contribution, is just beyond salary. And that can lead to a higher engagement. More importantly, lower turnover and better collaboration, ultimately benefiting the company's performance. Next, lesson number 7, focus on merit and potential, not just credentials. Predicting the future contribution is hard. Relying solely on past credentials can be misleading. Hiring beyond resume. So Akio Morita's book, Never Mind School Records, and Sony's policy of disregarding academic records post-hire reflected a core belief. So avoid the trap of credentialism. Scholastic achievement doesn't always correlate strongly with real-world problem solving, drive, or adaptability. By focusing on assessing intrinsic motivation, learning, ability, and potential, Sony could tap into a wider talent pool and build a culture based on actual contribution, not just pedigree. Lesson number 8, implement rational error handling for learning. Mistakes are inevitable. How an organization responds determines if they become liabilities or assets. So you have to learn from setback. Akio discouraged blaming individuals for mistakes, instead focusing on understanding the root causes to prevent recurrence. Go ahead. If you make a mistake, you will learn. Just don't make the same mistake twice. This approach drives errors underground, hindering learning and improvement. Fostering psychological safety allows mistakes to be surfaced, analyzed systematically, and converted into valuable organizational knowledge. This encourages calculated risk-taking, essential for innovation, by removing the paralyzing fear of personal failure for every setback. And same thing with Microsoft. They encourage people to make mistakes. You have to build a culture where it is okay for people to fail. It's okay for people to make a mistake. Don't make that mistake twice. And this will lead to growth. This will lead to experiment, and creating a culture is going to be something that I see great organizations repeatedly do, and it is a common pattern for the people that always progress and move forward. Lesson number 9, practice global adaptation, balance scale, and local nuance. Operating globally requires navigating the tension between universal standards and local realities. So think globally, act locally. Akio moved to his family to New York in 1963 to deeply understand the crucial US market. So that the best way for you to understand the market is immerse yourself in that market. So Sony initially tried different names for Walkman regionally. Soundabout, Stowaway, before standardizing based on observed market feedback. Effective global strategy needs both coherence, which is global brand, core tech, and adaptation, local marketing, distribution, and cultural understanding. This requires strong feedback loops, willingness to learn from local markets, like standardizing the Walkman name, and sometimes deep personal immersion to bridge cultural and operational gaps. It's about managing complexity, not imposing uniformity. And the last lesson: ensure effective value communication through tangible demonstration. A great product is useless if its core benefit isn't just clearly understood by the customer. The pocket radio, the sharp pockets. When Sony's 1955 transistor radio was slightly too big standard for US sharp pockets, Akio didn't just rely on specs. He had salespeople wear slightly larger custom pockets. The core value was portability. The larger the pocket wasn't deception. It was a simple, pragmatic, and tangible way to demonstrate this key benefit instantly. It overcame a minor physical friction point to communicate the product's essence effectively. Focus on making the core value proposition visceral and easily grasped by the target audience. All right, that is the 10 business lessons from Akio. This knowledge isn't inspiration, it's ammunition. The principles are timeless, and this is why Steve Jobs looked up to Akio. The application is brutal. You either learn to wield these weapons or you become a casualty statistics for those who do. The margin of safety in today's market, it isn't thinning, it's evaporating. So consider subscribing and see you next time. And at the end of this video, I mentioned earlier that Steve Jobs looked up to Akio. And if you want to know the greatest lessons, business lessons from Steve Jobs, I created a video about that. Click somewhere on the screen and it will lead you to that. Subscribe, share. See you next time. Peace.